Well, my dear friends, we're going to talk today about the history of Croatia and its link with the Western culture. Number 6, we're going to go from 1946 till 1974. In previous episodes, we reached to the World War II, and during these years, during 1941 to 1945, these were the limits, the borders of the state of Croatia, the independent state of Croatia. And we also talked about the figure of Tito. Tito was a Croatian, organized the Croatian resistance units against the Axis in 1941, and then he grew stronger with the Communist Party, and with the help of Stalin and Churchill at the end of the war, he transformed the monarchic Yugoslavia into a federation, into a communist Yugoslavia, and another totalitarian state. He was born in Croatia from a Croatian father and a Slovenian mother. He worked at the Benz automobile factory as a curiosity, and enlisted in the Austro-Hungarian army during World War I, decorated and taken prisoner, sent to a prisoner field or camp, and then with the Bolshevik Revolution, he was freed and he enlisted in the Red Army. At the end of World War I, Stalin appointed him as the Secretary General of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia, and he founded the Communist Party of Croatia. In 1943, with British and Russian support, he proclaimed a federal government and appointed himself as Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, and Marshal. But who was Tito? He was a hero, a humanist, or common murderer. Were they 1, 2, 3 Titos? Well, there's always been a lot of writers telling stories, maybe tales, but it's a fact that witnesses from Krumborec, the place where he was born, always declared that this Tito they were listening, that was not the same child they knew, or the same young man he knew, because he didn't speak the language in a proper way, and because his political discourse also changed. He had then, after 1948, a confrontation with Stalin, who sent killers to kill Tito, let us say. But this they didn't succeed in their attempts. There's also said that Tito himself sent a letter to Stalin telling him to stop these attempts, and if not, he would do only one attempt to kill Stalin. But that's another tale. In 1945, there was this operation called Killhole, and it developed in the nearbys of Bleiburg. This was being investigated from 1969 from this Slovenian historian, Roman Leljak. Leljak, with his findings, made some kind of a scandal, and then in 1973, the U.S. Congress said, no way. He had to send senators to investigate this operation. This operation began in May 14, 1945, in the Battle of Poljana. Well, the war was already over. Germany was already surrendered. Germany surrendered on May 8th, and this happened 6 days later. So there was no excuse. This was not a battle. These were only a killing of prisoners. Several thousand of prisoners were taken. Croats, Germans, Slovenes, Montenegrins, Italians, all the Spaniards, Cossacks, anti-communist Russians, Moroccans, Algerians, approximately in this first moment called the Battle of Poliana, 30,000 were executed. I have to take care with the words I use because I don't want to be punished and say some words that YouTube doesn't like. But how can I tell a story? And I have been changing some words to make it less hard to understand. The majority of the army crosses the Austrian border and seeks to surrender to the British Fifth Army. They thought that maybe British were more gentlemen and they would help them. This happened between May 15 and 17. Remember, May the 8th, the war was over. This happened after the war was over. 300,000 human beings, 200,000 Croats, the rest Germans, Slovenes, etc., including 35,000 civilians. On May 14, a direct order is received from Churchill to hand these prisoners over these Yugoslav partisans. This was exactly the same than, say, execute them. Exactly the same thing. The prisoners were disarmed and the generals were tricked into negotiation and they were also executed. The disarmed soldiers refused to be handed over the partisans, so they were attacked and machine gunned directly by this, with the passive and complicit gaze of the British. Incredible, but true. Result, 45 to 57,000 casualties. And from May 20th onwards, it began the second phase, called the death marches. We changed the name here for the same reason, the infamous memory, the death marches. Those are called. These are images of the people waiting, where they were machine gunned. And these were photos, actually photos of the phase one that I've been describing. This is a very interesting book if you want to get more in touch or get more deeply of what happened. This is written in Spanish by Carmen Berlichak. This is an Argentinian, a Croatian Argentinian politician that wrote this book. Not only this book, several books. Then we said that on May the 20th, the phase two began in inhumane conditions, repeated executions, mass burials. Total, 300,000 soldiers and unarmed civilians killed. Men, the elderly, women, and children. More than 3,000 mass graves have been discovered. Mainly, of course, in Slovenia, because all this happened in Slovenia. This is an original photo from these marches. Another one, you can see here a lady and a boy, a young man. There's another photo taken from the book of Berlichak. And this is what has been found. Has been found 2,847 sites till the 2009. Nowadays, there should be more than 3,000, of course. That's why I talk about 3,000, but I don't have the exact number. I don't have the exact number in this moment. I don't like to make these comparisons, but everyone talks and knows about the atomic bombs that killed 240 people. And Bleiburg killed 350,000 people. Nobody talks about Bleiburg. Only a few Croatians talk about it. Until very few years ago, No one could say in Yugoslavia talk about Bleiburg. No one could say that name. He could go to jail, and he could also go to another world if they found you talking about Bleiburg. What's the conclusion of this horrible situation? Well, from the legal point of view, Croatia had entered the La Hague Convention in 1943 as a belligerent nation. Geneva Conventions showed that there was a very great, very big violation of the protection of the wounded, sick, prisoners of war, and non-combatant civilians. There's no excuse at all. Great Britain had never been a signatory of these Geneva Conventions, the first convention since 1864. There's no excuse for what happened. Here's the Dobrava Memorial Park in Maribor, in Slovenia, in remembering of all this situation. And here are the alleged criminals. Well, you know already. When you win the war, you are not a criminal. Even if you've been a criminal, you don't go to court. But if you lose, then you go to court. Of course you go to court. Nor did Tito, neither did Churchill paid. And there's another one. There's Harold Macmillan. He was the commander of the British Fifth Army. He was prized because years later, in 1957, he was assigned under the Churchill's wing. He was decided Prime Minister of Great Britain, and he was there for 6 years. Here is where 1960, here's once again these two big friends. They were very friends one each other, Tito and Churchill, together in England. And here is the books that narrates all of this. And it's not written by a Croatian, it's not written by a German, it's written by a British. Christopher Catherwood explains, see here, supporting the Yugoslav communists in World War II. That narrates all this that I'm telling you. Very interesting book to read if you want to get profound on all this information. Coming back to Tito. This is the house in Krumvorec where he was born. Not a house of poor men. They were workers, but they lived in a very good house. 1948, he separated from the Soviet communists to develop his own communism. But he was a tourist. See, here in El Cairo, taking films. He was a film lover. And at his death, the Yugoslavians made this coin in his honor. But he left personally, not property of the state, but his own property. He left 34 villas. This is the one in the Brioni Islands. Here's the inside of this house specifically. He left a car collection, 16 collection cars, in which you have Cadillacs, you have Bentleys, you have the best cars of the world. I don't remember the name, but Rolls-Royce and everyone. Mercedes, all those cars. And he left also a boat, a very small boat, I'm joking, of course, 35 meters length, incredible. This is not a boat, it's a ship. 329 tons. A ship, a VIP ship, 16 passengers only, 8 crew members, a gym, a very beautiful kitchen. I don't have the photos, I don't think. I pulled them away. I have the photos of the inside. Really a big ship and a big luxury ship. In that ship here, you see him with Sofia Loren. Here we see him with Sofia Loren and Carlo Ponti. Here we see him with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. They were very famous because in those days they did the film Cleopatra. So Elizabeth Taylor was Cleopatra. This one was Mark Antony was Richard Burton. Here we see him with Jules Briner or Briner. Here we see him with Silva Koshina, Croatian actress, but she was famous in Italy, in Italian film factories. So he liked to be in the jet set. Here we see him with the Queen Elizabeth. So we arrived to this new book of Carmen Berlichak also, In the Name of Tito. This is a very interesting book. And she promotes the book with this between the glamour and horror. And it really was something like that. It was between the glamour and horror. But this always happens with a lot of dictators, no doubt. They are between the glamour and the horror. As we said that maybe there was one Tito or two Titos or three, I want to show you these photographs that I looked for them. This is a work of no one. It's my own work. This is the partisan Tito. This is Tito at the first years of his government, approximately in the 50s, and this is Tito in the 70s. When you see the ears, you see easily that this guy over here and this guy over here, they have the same ear. You see? You can easily see this is the same person. But in this case, if you look at the ears, you don't have to be an MD or an anatomist to realize that this ear is absolutely different to this one and to this one. Different. This shape doesn't modify in years. The shape of these parts, the helix, the anti-helix, and all the parts that I don't know how to say it in English, are absolutely different from this partisan to this Tito from afterwards. So I leave you this interrogation. In Venezuela, we're going to live years of democracy, and here are different presidents, until Pérez Jiménez, that he was also a dictator, no doubt. This is a time when a lot of Europeans and the post-war, because of the economical situation in Europe, they look and they travel to America. And when they travel to South America, they travel especially to Argentina, who was very famous because of the richness of their field production, to Chile because of the copper, and to Venezuela because of the oil. So these are the ruins of the places where they arrived. And this is the ship with a lot of Europeans arrived. In these ships, they arrived a lot of Croatian also. And they were met in these barracks over here. While in Yugoslavia, the communists still develop all this big Yugoslavia that included all these countries: Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia Herzegovina, Serbia, Macedonia, and Montenegro. Serbia included these two regions: the Kosovo, that is not Serbia, the Kosovo will get his own independence, and Vojvodina, that is neither it's Serbia. But anyway, these regions are not Serbian regions, but these were included in this Yugoslavia. When this happened, there were two situations in the borders. First situation was the loss of 2/3, maybe not 2/3, but more than half of Sirmia. Sirmia, this region over here, has always been Croatian, but absolutely always. The Serbians didn't want to have a frontier here. Here, approximately, is located Belgrade. They didn't want to have their capital in the frontier. So they convinced Tito, and in 1920 they did a map where they took more than half, look here, this is the actual Croatia, the current Croatia, and they took more of the half of Sirmia and took it in the bank and in the map, and they put it Serbian. Was allowed by Tito. Tito gave his blessings to this. So, arguing this map and profiting what they have always done to take away the people that originally lived there by force, they repopulate with mostly Serbian people. So when we arrive to the 1990s, this was already a Serbian position, but this was stolen from us, no doubt, was stolen under the eyes of Tito. So this was lost, and this one recovered. Istria had always been, in the Middle Age, Croatia. But then there were a lot of years that were partly of it. Part of it was Venice, then was Austria, then was Italy, and then finally in 1947, really, because there were 2 years of negotiations, in 1947 it was divided into a very, very slow, let's say, here, tongue that finishes in Trieste from Italy, also a small exit to the sea to the Slovenian. The Slovenian had never had an exit to the sea. So this one was also a present of Tito here in Koper, and mostly Istria. All of Istria was Croatian. It stayed in the maps in Croatian as it does nowadays. Nowadays this is Italy, this is Slovenia, and this is Croatia. So we have Croatia with the limits of now. We have it since 1947. We have these limits. Exactly the limits we have today. Here, remember, this is the antique Yugoslavia. This is the communist Yugoslavia. Well, Tito's Yugoslavia lasted for 30 years. As the communism, as the supranational ideology, like it is always, a communism is not a national ideology. It's a fight, but there's nothing of national. 1948, the state becomes a communist variant, known as Titoism with workers' self-management. Well, it really changed. Was not the same, the communism in the Soviet Union, that the communism in Yugoslavia. That's, to be said, the truth. In 1971, years passed, and the Croatians, they create a movement with the name of Croatian Spring, but didn't have enough success. But in 1974, all these things produced a new constitution. This fight of Croatians to be once again a nation this is going to be considered in this new constitution. In 1974, this is very, very, very important. Why is very, very important, this constitution? What will happen in the coming years? That's what the motive for the next chapter. But I'll tell you why. That's in advance. This is very important because this constitution considered that every one of the nations of the social republics that integrated the Federal Union of Republics of Yugoslavia could separate through could gain autonomy, better than separate, could get autonomy by a popular referendum if this happened. And this is the legal base of what's going to come afterwards. What will happen in the coming years? We'll see it in the next chapter, next and last chapter of this brief histories of Croatia. Thank you very much for your time. Remember, if you like it, give it a like. If you want to subscribe, you'll receive this. Only a very very simple way of letting you know some things that are being studied. Thank you very much, and see you, if you like it, in the next chapter.